October 17, 1943, Camp Aliceville, Alabama. At 2:47 in the morning, a German prisoner sat frozen in place, his metal mess kit shaking as he stared at the food in front of him. For 3 years with the Africa Corps, meals had meant rough bread mixed with fillers and bitter coffee substitutes. Now, weighing just 128 pounds, he faced scrambled eggs, bacon, soft white bread spread with butter, and real coffee mixed with sugar and cream. It was more food than he had seen in months. Later, he would describe the transformation plainly. When captured, he weighed 128 pounds. After 2 years in American captivity, he weighed 185. He joked that he had become so heavy his eyes seemed to disappear. That 57-pound gain was not unusual. Thousands of German prisoners across the United States experienced similar changes during World War II. While soldiers still fighting on the Eastern Front survived on frozen scraps and minimal rations, German prisoners in the United States ate the same meals as American garrison troops. This was required by the Geneva Convention, but it also revealed something deeper. More than 425,000 German prisoners lived in camps across the country, watching firsthand a level of abundance that reshaped not only their bodies, but also how they understood America itself. When Axis forces surrendered in Tunisia in May 1943, medical teams found an army in serious physical decline. Supply lines had collapsed, and months of desert fighting had taken a heavy toll. Soldiers once considered elite were reduced to thin, exhausted figures. Official ration plans promised enough calories for combat, but by late 1942, those promises meant little. Meals often consisted of hard bread, sometimes crawling with insects, or thin coffee substitutes made from roasted plants and sweetened with artificial flavors. Midday meals might include small portions of canned meat, often horse or mule, stretched with fillers. Dried vegetables appeared at night, expanding in the stomach but offering little real nourishment. U.S. Army Dr. James Patterson examined prisoners at the Oran Processing Center in May 1943 and recorded severe malnutrition. Vitamin shortages caused night blindness and scurvy, while protein deficiencies led to swelling and fatigue. Recovery began almost immediately once prisoners were placed on ships bound for America. Liberty ships, produced at remarkable speed, transported up to 30,000 prisoners each month. Their first onboard meal, beef stew, potatoes, white bread, butter, and coffee with milk, contained more nutrition than many had received in an entire week. Some prisoners became sick after eating. Their bodies were unprepared for rich food after long deprivation. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison Matthews recalled watching prisoners board the ships. Many were weak with hollow faces and visible ribs, unable to climb the ramps without help. Feeding had to begin slowly. Even American medical staff were struck by the contrast. Under Article 11 of the 1929 Geneva Convention, prisoners of war were entitled to food equal in quality and quantity to depot troops. For the United States, this rule also served a larger purpose. As Colonel Edward Davidson explained in a 1943 memo, treating German prisoners well increased the chances that American soldiers held overseas would receive similar care. The Provost Marshal General's office managed the effort with detailed organization. Camps tracked daily calorie counts, rotating menus, medical checkups, and weight records. Swiss inspectors and Red Cross representatives regularly reviewed conditions. Standard rations included meat, bread, potatoes, dairy products, fresh vegetables, fruit, and unlimited real coffee. Daily intake often reached 3,000 to 4,000 calories. Prisoners could also use camp-issued currency to buy extras like chocolate, soft drinks, ice cream, beer, or cigarettes. Supplying this system required enormous coordination. Quartermasters ordered food for thousands at a time, managed refrigeration, and ran kitchens almost non-stop. In many cases, prisoners ate better than German soldiers still in the field. One former prisoner later wrote about gaining 57 pounds during captivity, a story repeated often in camp records. Georg Gartner, a sergeant captured in Tunisia, later became known for escaping from Camp Deming, New Mexico in 1945 and living quietly in the U.S. for decades. In his memoir, he described how amazed prisoners were by the steady meals and fair treatment, things their own country could no longer provide. Military chaplain Alex Funk, held at Camp Algona, Iowa, wrote that many prisoners came away with a positive impression of the United States. After the war, he found that weight gains of 40 to 60 pounds were common. The changes were so dramatic that families sometimes failed to recognize returning relatives. Captain William Burke, who processed repatriated prisoners in 1946, observed that many looked healthy and successful rather than defeated. Families expecting thin, worn-out soldiers were shocked to see men who appeared strong and well cared for. Camp Concordia, Kansas, housed about 4,000 prisoners on hundreds of acres. It featured modern kitchens, electric lighting, hot water, heating, and plumbing, amenities unfamiliar to many rural Germans. Educational programs offered hundreds of courses in partnership with nearby universities. The camp itself was built in just 90 days, reflecting the organizational scale of the American war effort. Camp Hearn, Texas, known locally as the Fritz Ritz, held up to 5,000 prisoners. Its kitchens ran around the clock, and bakeries produced thousands of loaves each day. Prisoners organized mess halls by region, recreating familiar dishes using American ingredients. The commanding officer encouraged cooperation by rewarding good behavior with extra privileges and food. Reports showed average weight gains of 45 pounds over a year and a half. At Camp Aliceville, Alabama, medical staff handled some of the weakest arrivals from the desert campaigns. Feeding plans were carefully staged. Doctors recorded rapid improvement as vitamin deficiencies disappeared and energy returned. Major Robert Harrison later published findings showing sharp weight increases in the first 3 months, followed by steady monthly gains. One prisoner arrived at 109 pounds and left at 181. Camp Papago Park in Arizona held naval prisoners who did not work. They spent time reading, gardening, and watching movies. In December 1944, 25 submarine officers escaped through a tunnel, planning to float down the Salt River into Mexico. The riverbed was dry. All were recaptured, several after running out of food. Even the desert could not compete with camp kitchens. Back home, this contrast caused anger among American civilians. While families used ration books for sugar, coffee, meat, and butter, German prisoners received these items daily. In 1944, Dorothy Mitchell of Topeka wrote to her congressman asking why her sons fought overseas while captured enemy soldiers in Kansas ate better than many Americans. The answer lay in strategy, law, and confidence. By feeding its enemies well, the United States demonstrated not just strength, but belief in its system, one meal at a time.
I haven't seen steak since Pearl Harbor. My family's monthly meat allowance is smaller than what these prisoners eat in 3 days. How do you explain that to a mother? Letters like this flooded congressional offices during the war. The government's answer rested on one word: reciprocity. Officials argued that treating German prisoners humanely was not generosity, but protection. Posters reminded the public, their good treatment ensures ours. Radio broadcasts repeated the message that nearly 90,000 American soldiers in enemy hands depended on German adherence to the Geneva Convention. Still, frustration spread. It intensified when prisoners were sent to work on nearby farms and appeared better fed than the farmers who hired them. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Race made the situation even more painful. Black American soldiers noticed that German prisoners could enter restaurants and public spaces that were closed to them. Corporal Rebert Trimmingham described one such moment in a widely read letter to Yank magazine. While stationed in Texas, he watched German prisoners eat inside a restaurant. He, wearing his uniform and combat ribbons, was told to use the back door for takeout. The message was unmistakable. Enemy soldiers received privileges denied to Americans serving their own country. That contradiction left deep scars. Even German prisoners, many of whom benefited directly, recognized the injustice. Some camp newspapers, edited by prisoners, ran opinion pieces questioning American segregation. It was one of the strangest outcomes of the war, Nazi soldiers openly criticizing racial policies in the United States. The prisoner labor program played a major role in both the war effort and prisoner health. By 1944, more than 300,000 prisoners were working across American farms. They helped harvest food that fed the nation and its allies, while also gaining access to meals beyond standard camp rations. Farmers, desperate for labor, often competed to keep work crews satisfied. Days began with hearty farm breakfasts, eggs, bacon, pancakes, and coffee. Lunches arrived in the fields, fried chicken, potatoes, vegetables, and pie. Cold drinks and snacks followed in the afternoon. After returning to camp, prisoners received another full dinner. Combined, daily intake often surpassed 5,000 calories. In Nebraska's sugar beet fields, prisoners encountered machines unlike anything they had known. Hans Dietrich, working near Scottsbluff, wrote that one American farmer using machinery could do the work of an entire German village. A single combine processed more grain in an hour than his community managed in a week by hand. Texas cotton farms employed thousands of prisoners during harvest season. The labor was exhausting under intense heat, but conditions included frequent breaks, unlimited water, and bonus food for strong output. Wilhelm Hartmann, who worked near Kaufman, gained 63 pounds in just over a year. He later recalled a rancher saying, "Hungry men don't work well. If only our officers had known that." California's Central Valley offered another startling contrast. Prisoners picked peaches, apricots, and oranges, eating freely as they worked. They watched surplus fruit pushed into pits when markets were full. Kurt Vogel wrote of seeing piles of oranges destroyed while his family survived on turnips back home. He asked if the fruit could be sent to Germany. The armor replied that it wasn't possible. That explanation, Vogel wrote, changed how he saw the world forever. Military doctors carefully recorded the physical changes. Major Thomas Richardson, Chief Medical Officer for the 8th Service Command, analyzed more than 50,000 examinations between 1943 and 1946. His findings revealed consistent recovery patterns. The first month involved adjustment, with little weight gain as digestive systems relearned how to process rich food. In the second month, weight increased rapidly, often 8 to 10 pounds. From months 3 to 6, gains averaged 3 to 4 pounds each month. After 6 months, progress slowed but continued, with most prisoners adding 40 to 60 pounds overall. Health improvements matched these changes. Vitamin deficiencies disappeared within 3 months. Scurvy vanished. Night blindness resolved. Dental care transformed lives. More than 400,000 dental procedures were performed, ranging from extractions to complex bridge work. Many prisoners received better dental treatment than they had ever known. Yet abundance brought new problems. German doctors working in camp hospitals noticed conditions linked to plenty rather than scarcity. Dr. Friedrich Hoffmann observed diabetes, high blood pressure, and gout appearing in men who had once survived on minimal calories. These were illnesses of comfort emerging in former victims of starvation. Mental strain followed physical recovery. Psychiatrists reported widespread guilt among prisoners who gained weight while their families suffered. Captain James Murray described what he called prosperity trauma, the stress of improving health while knowing home was collapsing. Prisoners worried how they would explain their appearance to loved ones and felt shame for enjoying meals during Germany's darkest years. Nothing captured this contrast more sharply than Christmas 1944. As the Battle of the Bulge raged and civilians in Germany survived on turnips, American camps prepared holiday meals beyond anything many prisoners had experienced even before the war. Archived menus show extraordinary spreads: large portions of roast turkey, glazed ham, buttery mashed potatoes, sweet potato casserole, vegetables, fresh rolls, multiple pies, ice cream, and unlimited hot drinks. Communities contributed as well. Church groups delivered thousands of cookies. Congregations knitted scarves for every prisoner. Even families living under rationing shared what little they had with captured enemies. Prisoners struggled to understand such kindness. One soldier, Richard Steinberg, described sitting before the feast knowing his family had nothing. Men cried openly, not from happiness, but from the weight of the moment. They ate quietly, each bite feeling like both relief and betrayal. Despite these conditions, escape attempts were rare. Out of 425,000 prisoners, only 2,222 attempts were recorded, with almost no lasting success. This was the lowest rate among major prisoner populations in modern war. The reason was simple: life inside the camps was safer and more stable than life outside. The famous Papago Park escape illustrated this clearly. 25 submarine officers spent months digging a long tunnel with spoons, hiding the dirt beneath the volleyball court. Their plan was to float down the Salt River into Mexico. The river was dry. Within weeks, all were recaptured, many surrendering when hunger set in. Years later, the escape leader admitted the attempt made no sense. Inside the camp, they had food, shelter, and security. Outside, there was desert, danger, and near certain capture. Ideology had pushed them to abandon comfort for hardship. Most prisoners understood reality. Escape offered little chance of success and high risk of starvation or return to combat. Remaining in camp meant survival. Working near factories completed the lesson. Prisoners saw assembly lines producing more food or equipment in hours than Germany facilities managed in days. Near Detroit, bombers rolled off lines faster than Germany could build training planes. Engineers among the prisoners realized the truth. This was not just a clash of armies, but of systems. One man wrote that they finally understood why defeat was inevitable. America could lose far more equipment and still continue forward. By the end, the message was unmistakable. The war was decided not only with weapons, but by organization, resources, and the ability to sustain life, even for enemies.
In the end, numbers told the story more clearly than bravery or tactics. Mathematics alone made defeat unavoidable. Agriculture revealed the same truth. American farms produced roughly twice the yield per acre compared to Germany, using only a fraction of the labor. Machines replaced muscle. One farmer, supported by tractors, harvesters, irrigation systems, fertilizers, and improved seeds, could manage land that required dozens of workers in Germany.
To prisoners raised on small subsistence farms, the results looked almost unreal. What unsettled them most was not abundance, but excess. Piles of potatoes were left to spoil because supply exceeded demand. Grain was burned to keep prices stable. Milk was poured into sewers when markets softened. Franz Müller wrote that only a nation with limitless resources could afford to discard food while Europe starved. That was when many prisoners grasped the nature of American power. It was not rooted solely in armies or weapons, but in surplus. Between 1945 and 1946, ships carried more than 370,000 German prisoners back across the Atlantic. Collectively, they had gained millions of pounds. They returned as living symbols of American prosperity, stepping off ships into shattered cities and empty pantries. The contrast was painful. Families struggled to accept how men had grown healthier in captivity, while loved ones at home endured hunger. Communities viewed their well-fed appearance with suspicion, as if it marked them as privileged or disloyal. That prosperity did not last. Military surveys tracked dramatic weight loss after repatriation. Within 6 months, many former prisoners lost 30 to 50 pounds. Bodies shaped by American rations could not endure German scarcity. Daily intake hovered around 1,550 calories when available, often less. The strength gained overseas vanished quickly. Heinrich Weber returned to Hamburg weighing 186 pounds, up from 134 at capture. Half a year later, he weighed 138. He explained simply that he gave his food to his children and survived on scraps. Knowing hunger after fullness, he said, was harder than hunger alone. Yet food was only part of what prisoners carried home. American camps had offered extensive education programs that left lasting marks. More than 50,000 prisoners enrolled in classes ranging from farming techniques to philosophy. Camp Concordia alone listed 300 subjects taught by professors from nearby colleges. Topics banned under Nazi rule, constitutional law, democratic theory, free markets were studied openly. Prisoners read works from thinkers long forbidden. They argued over systems of government, economic ideas, and civic responsibility. Intellectual growth mirrored physical recovery. Camp newspapers shifted from propaganda tools into platforms for debate. One widely read paper reached tens of thousands and featured discussions about Germany's future, democracy's limits, and reconstruction after defeat. Dr. Wilhelm von Braun, who taught physics while imprisoned, later noted that camp facilities surpassed many German universities. Laboratories were well equipped, textbooks plentiful, and academic freedom genuine. Jewish scholars who had fled Germany taught alongside former enemies without hostility. That openness left a deep impression. A quiet re-education effort succeeded precisely because it avoided force. Prisoners were not lectured, they observed. By 1945, more than 25,000 voluntarily joined courses on democratic systems. They read materials once punishable by death. They practiced free speech in camp publications. They saw American society openly debate its own flaws, something impossible under dictatorship. Every pound gained became proof of a functioning system. Former officers who once pledged loyalty to Hitler began planning democratic futures. Colonel Hans von Luck later wrote that they arrived convinced of their beliefs and left questioning them, not through persuasion, but through evidence. The system worked. Their own had failed. The proof was visible in their own bodies. After the war, about 5,000 former prisoners immigrated to the United States. Thousands more maintained friendships with American families for decades. These ties, formed under extraordinary conditions, created lasting connections between former enemies. Immigration was difficult. In Germany, they were suspected of American sympathies. In America, they were remembered as former foes. Still, many persisted, drawn by memories of opportunity. Some became doctors, engineers, and farmers. Others, like Georg Gartner, blended quietly into American life for decades. Love forged the strongest bonds. Despite official rules, relationships formed through letters and work details. Over 1,000 former prisoners eventually married American women. Their families became living symbols of reconciliation. In 1985, hundreds of former prisoners gathered in Austin with children and grandchildren born in America. One speaker summed it up simply: they arrived as enemies and left as friends. They came hungry and returned full. Every pound gained had taught them something about democracy's ability to produce stability and abundance. Economically, the prisoner program defied wartime logic. Though costly, it nearly paid for itself through labor while delivering enormous strategic returns. It improved treatment for American prisoners overseas, relieved labor shortages, and reshaped how thousands of Germans viewed the United States. Post-war studies showed its influence. Former prisoners introduced American farming methods that raised German yields by 30% within 5 years. Management practices learned in camps helped fuel the economic recovery that followed. A generation of leaders emerged inclined towards cooperation rather than conflict. One U.S. officer concluded that peace had been purchased with food. Millions of pounds gained became political capital that paid off for decades. The deepest irony remained clear. While Germany starved, its soldiers thrived in captivity. While civilians waited in ration lines, prisoners chose between dishes. While comrades died at the front, others attended classes and played sports. That contradiction proved decisive. America's strength lay not only in weapons, but in the ability to sustain life, even for enemies. Dinner tables became tools of strategy. Tables large enough to feed former foes and generous enough to change minds. The German prisoners learned that their true enemy was not America, but the ideology that had led them into war against such abundance. Each pound gained marked a loss of belief in that ideology. Each meal offered a lesson in productivity, stability, and freedom. They returned heavier in body and changed in outlook, carrying memories of a nation confident enough to share its plenty, even with those who once came to destroy it.